The Shattered Compass. Chapter 1. The mapmaker's secret Elira had always believed maps were lies. Beautiful lies, sometimes, elegant and intricate with their curling lines and delicate inkwork, but still untruths. A map claimed certainty. A map promised knowledge. Yet no line of ink could capture the way the forest changed its face between morning and dusk, how the desert dunes wandered each year like restless nomads, or how the sea concealed entire kingdoms beneath a skin of blue. Her father had taught her that when she was small, perched on his knee as he sketched coastlines with a steady hand. "A map is not the world," he had said, tapping her brow with a stained finger. "The world breathes, grows, shifts. But we make maps because people fear the unknown." Now, years later, Elira sat alone in the cramped attic of her workshop, hunched over a spread of parchment that smelled faintly of salt and smoke. Ink-stained fingertips hovered above the page. The lantern at her elbow sputtered, throwing restless shadows across the clutter of compasses, astrolabes, and rolled charts stacked like brittle scrolls. Rain ticked against the slanted roof tiles above, and the storm outside made the rafters groan. She should have gone home hours ago. But the parchment before her was not her own creation. It was older than she could date, its edges curled and fragile, its lines drawn in a hand both elegant and alien. She had found it in a chest tucked beneath floorboards her landlord claimed had been undisturbed for generations. It wasn't the discovery of old maps that unsettled her. That was half her work, but the fact that this one didn't correspond to any world she knew. She traced the lines with her eyes for the 100th time. An ocean she couldn't name, broken by islands in impossible formations. Symbols like constellations scrawled along the margins, but not in any language she recognized. And in the center, drawn where no cartographer would dare place a compass rose, was a jagged design that seemed more shard than star. Her breath caught when her fingertips brushed it. The ink wasn't ink at all. It was raised, like metal pressed into the page, cold, sharp. She frowned, leaning closer. She'd thought it a trick of fatigue earlier, but no. The shape had a weight to it, though it lay flat on parchment. Thunder rolled outside and the lantern flickered. In that pulse of shadow and light, the lines on the map seemed to shift. Not dramatically, but like the coastlines breathed beneath her gaze. Elira sat back, heartbeat quickening. "Get a hold of yourself," she muttered. She'd worked too many late nights before. Exhaustion often twisted the eye. Yet she couldn't shake the sensation that the map was watching her. She forced herself to roll it carefully and slide it into a protective case. Better to sleep on it, return tomorrow with fresh eyes. But when she turned, her elbow knocked a jar of pins to the floor, scattering brass tacks across the wooden planks. She bent to gather them, and froze. One of the pins had rolled against the map's case and stopped at the strange compass design. It stuck, as if pulled by a magnet, and when she tugged it resisted before snapping free. Her mouth went dry. She touched the parchment again, and this time the symbol beneath her fingertips thrummed faintly, like the string of a harp plucked from within the page. Elira. Her name drifted through the room like a breath. She spun, lantern raised high, but the attic was empty. Only shelves groaning under maps, rain against the roof, the smell of ink and dust. Elira. The whisper again, softer, as though woven into the sound of the storm. Her hand trembled as she turned back to the map. The jagged compass design glowed faintly, a pale silver light bleeding from the parchment. And then, without warning, the page split. Not torn. Split, as though it had always concealed something inside. From the tear slid a shard of metal, no bigger than her palm, shaped like a crescent with edges uneven as if broken from a larger hole. It gleamed with the same cold silver as the ink. Elira staggered back, nearly toppling her chair. The shard lay on the parchment like a secret revealed, humming faintly in her bones. She shouldn't touch it. Every instinct screamed that. Yet curiosity tugged stronger. When her fingers closed around it, the world tilted. She was standing on cliffs above an endless sea, the sky fractured with strange stars. A figure cloaked in shadow strode before her, carrying the very same compass shard, whole and unbroken, its light a beacon that made mountains bow. And behind them, something vast stirred, its shape obscured, its breath like a storm rolling across the land. Elira! The vision snapped, and she gasped to find herself back in her attic, lantern sputtering wildly. She clutched the shard to her chest. Its glow dimmed, but the weight of the vision pressed against her skull. She staggered to her feet. She needed air, needed to clear her head. But as she reached for the door, the boards creaked outside the workshop. She froze. No one should be there at this hour. The storm had driven the whole town of Luthien indoors. Yet she heard it. Boots scuffing against wood, a pause, then the unmistakable sound of someone trying her latch. Elira snuffed the lantern instantly, plunging the attic into darkness. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She had no weapon but the shard, so she clutched it tight. The latch clicked. Slow. Deliberate. Elira! The whisper came again. This time not from the shard, but from beyond the door. She backed away, heart in her throat. Whoever they were, they knew her name, and they were here for the map. Her father's words echoed in her skull. The world breathes, grows, shifts. But people fear the unknown. Elira swallowed hard. Fear would not save her now. She tucked the shard into her satchel, shoved the map deep beneath her work table, and braced herself. The door creaked open. A shadow slipped inside, and Elira, cartographer, liar of landscapes, keeper of truths, prepared to step into the unknown. The Shattered Compass. Chapter 2. The skyship, Marauder Dawn, rose over Luthien like a weary promise. The rain had cleared, leaving cobblestones slick and shining as if the town were newly polished. Elira pulled her cloak tighter, hood drawn low, as she slipped through the narrow streets toward the harbor. Her satchel was heavy against her hip, the shard inside thrumming like a second heartbeat. She hadn't slept. She'd spent the night listening for footsteps outside her door, every creak of the timbers a threat. By dawn, she'd made her choice. She had to leave the city. Whoever had come for her would return, and she couldn't risk the map, or the fragment, falling into their hands. The harbor was already alive with noise. Dock workers shouted as they hauled crates of spice and iron, gulls screamed from the rigging, and the tang of salt mixed with the stench of fish guts. Normally, Elira found comfort here. Ships carried stories of far-off lands, and maps were born of journeys. But today, the air pressed thick and tense. Word had spread of raids along the coast, supply ships disappearing, caravans stripped bare. The culprit was whispered like a curse. Kael, the skyship marauder. Elira had heard the name in taverns, muttered with equal parts admiration and disdain. A rogue captain who commanded the Eversong, a ship said to glide through the skies faster than wind. Some swore he was a fallen noble, others that he'd been born in chains. All agreed on one truth. He took what he wanted and he always escaped. She wasn't looking for him. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The first sign was the shadow. As Elira reached the pier's edge, a vast silhouette drifted across the water. She lifted her gaze, and her breath caught. The Eversong loomed above the harbor, sails spread wide like wings of hammered bronze. Its hull was sleek, lined with panels of storm glass that shimmered faintly in the rising sun. Runes glowed along its keel, humming with the power that held it aloft. Where other skyships creaked like ungainly birds, this one moved like a predator circling prey. Dock workers froze, pointing skyward. Cries of alarm spread through the crowd. Skyship! Raiders! The Eversong descended with predatory grace, dropping anchor lines that struck the pier like coiled serpents. Figures slid down the ropes. Armed men and women with scarves masking their faces, blades glinting in the morning light. Panic erupted. Merchants abandoned their stalls, sailors scrambled for weapons, children vanished into doorways. Elira's heart lurched. She ducked into the shadow of a fishmonger's cart, clutching her satchel. She needed to slip away before the raiders spotted her, but curiosity rooted her feet. for through the chaos strode a man who could only be Kael. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a long coat of weather-worn leather that swirled behind him like a cape. A saber hung at his hip, and his dark hair was tied back with careless ease. His smile cut sharper than his blade, a grin that spoke of danger and delight in equal measure. Citizens of Luthien. His voice carried easily over the din, smooth as oiled steel. Fear not, we take only what we need, and we take it quickly. Stand aside, and no blood will spill. The harbor guards rushed forward, spears raised. Kael sighed dramatically, drew his saber in one fluid motion, and parried the first strike with a flourish that sent sparks flying. Elira knew she should run. Yet, as she watched him disarm one guard with a twist of his wrist, then tip his hat in mock courtesy before sending another sprawling, she felt a strange tug, admiration, irritation, and something like inevitability. Then her satchel pulsed, and her stomach sank. The shard was reacting. And worse, Kael's eyes had locked on her. She bolted. Her boots slapped against the cobblestones as she darted through the chaos. She heard Kael laugh, a low, amused sound that chilled her more than any curse. After her! 2 raiders peeled away to pursue. Elira weaved between crates, heart hammering. She'd always been quick-footed, but they were gaining. She ducked into a narrow alley, only to skid to a halt at the sight of another raider blocking the exit. "Pretty thing," he sneered, raising his blade. Before he could strike, the wall beside him exploded into dust. Kael stepped through the wreckage, saber dripping with mortar. "I said after her," he drawled, flicking the blade aside. "Not before. You'll spoil the fun." The raider scowled but retreated at his captain's glance. Elira backed against the alley wall, breath ragged. "Stay away." Kael tilted his head, studying her with the interest of a cat watching a mouse. "You've got fire in you, little mapmaker." Her blood froze. "How do you know what I am?" "That satchel of yours," he said, eyes glinting. "I've seen enough treasure chests to recognize when something precious is rattling inside. And I don't need a map to know it's worth more than gold." Elira clutched the satchel tighter. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe. Maybe not." His grin widened. "But my instincts are rarely wrong. You've got something the rest of the world would kill to own. And lucky you, I'm offering protection in exchange." "I don't need your protection," thunder rumbled. Not from the sky, but from the harbor. A squadron of city guards had rallied, bringing with them a ballista mounted with storm bolts, its crystal tip already glowing. Kael glanced back, hissed through his teeth. Damn persistent. He turned to Elira again, eyes sharp. "You want to survive the next 5 minutes, mapmaker? You come with me." Before she could protest, he grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the harbor. She stumbled after him, too shocked to resist. The guards loosed the storm bolt. It screamed through the air, trailing lightning. Kael yanked Elira against his chest and spun, the bolt striking the ground where she'd been standing. The blast sent crates splintering, sparks flying. Elira gasped, ears ringing. Kael only laughed, eyes alight with the thrill of it. "See? Already saving your life." They reached the pier, where the Eversong hovered just above the rooftops. Ropes dangled, crew shouting encouragement. Kael lifted Elira without warning, tossing her toward the line. She caught it with a strangled cry, clinging desperately as it swung her into the air. "Climb, darling." Kael shouted, already scaling the rope beside her with effortless grace. She scrambled upward, every muscle burning, until rough hands hauled her onto the deck. Crew members cheered as Kael vaulted aboard after her, saber raised in salute. "Cast off!" he roared. The Eversong lurched upward, engines humming as sails unfurled. Below, the guards fired another volley, but the bolts fell short. The harbor shrank, the city a patchwork of roofs and spires, the sea beyond glittering like molten glass. Elira collapsed against the railing, chest heaving. She should have felt relief, but dread curled in her gut. She'd escaped the city, but now she was in the hands of Kael, the skyship marauder, and from the knowing smirk he cast her way, she realized he wasn't about to let her go. The shattered compass. Chapter 3. Storms over Azure Bay, the Eversong sailed like no other vessel Elira had ever seen. Where sea ships groaned and rolled with the waves, this one cut through the skies with predatory ease. The sails shimmered with threads of storm glass, catching currents of wind invisible to the naked eye. The deck thrummed beneath her boots, alive with the heartbeat of runes that pulsed faintly along the planks. For hours after their escape from Luthien, Elira stood at the railing, refusing to look at Kael or his crew. The city shrank into memory behind them, the coastline a jagged scar along the horizon. Freedom should have tasted sweet. Instead, she felt trapped in a cage of wood and sailcloth. Kael was everywhere, barking orders with the confidence of a man born to command, flashing grins that made his crew laugh even as they obeyed without hesitation. He moved with the ease of someone utterly at home among ropes and rigging, and every so often he'd glance at her, a spark of amusement in his dark eyes, as if he could read her thoughts. Finally, he strolled over, resting one hand on the railing beside her. "You've got that look," she stiffened. "What look?" "The one that says you're debating whether to leap overboard or slit my throat while I sleep." Elira glared. "What makes you so sure I wouldn't do both?" Kael laughed, a rich, careless sound. "Oh, I like you. Sharp tongue, sharper eyes. But let's be honest, you're not a killer. And if you jumped, the bay would swallow you before you got 3 strokes out." Her gaze drifted downward. Azure Bay stretched endlessly below them, a vast expanse of restless blue. Legends said its waters ran deeper than the roots of mountains, home to creatures that never surfaced. She shivered and looked away. "I didn't ask to be here," she said, "and yet here you are." Kael's smile softened, just slightly. "You've got something, mapmaker. Something that makes the world's wolves sniff your trail. Better to keep company with a fox who knows the tricks of survival." "You mean you? Who else?" He spread his arms as though presenting himself to the heavens. Before she could reply, a shout rose from the crow's nest. "Captain! Stormfront ahead!" Kael's grin faded. He squinted at the horizon where black clouds churned like boiling ink. Lightning flashed deep within their folds, jagged veins of light that danced across the sea. "Azure Bay doesn't throw ordinary storms," Kael muttered. He turned, his voice sharp. "Reef the sails. Secure the cargo. Nira, keep us steady on the wind line." The crew erupted into motion, ropes tightening, sails folding. The hum of the engines rose, a deeper, more urgent vibration. Elira clutched the railing as the first gusts hit, fierce and wet, spraying the deck with salt. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking her bones. The storm swallowed them. Rain lashed sideways, needles against her skin. The ship heaved as winds tried to tear it apart. Sailors shouted above the roar, their voices nearly lost. The sky was chaos. A maelstrom of cloud and lightning, the sea below a frothing nightmare. Elira staggered, nearly thrown from her feet. Kael appeared at her side, steady as iron, and shoved a rope into her hands. "Tie yourself down if you want to live." She obeyed, fumbling with numb fingers as another wave of wind slammed the ship. Kael braced her, his hand gripping her arm just long enough to anchor her before he turned back to the helm. Through the storm, the shard in her satchel began to pulse, at first faintly, then stronger until it burned like a brand against her hip. Elira's breath caught. She tugged it free, shielding it beneath her cloak. The crescent of metal glowed faint silver, humming in rhythm with the storm. And then she saw them, shapes in the clouds, not lightning, not illusions, creatures woven from storm and sea spray. Vast serpents with wings of cloud, eyes glowing like suns. They coiled through the tempest, their roars masked by thunder, their bodies flickering in and out of existence as if born of the storm itself. Elira stumbled to the helm. "Kael, we're not alone." He glanced at her, saw the shard in her hands, and swore. Stormborn. As if summoned by his words, one of the serpents dove. Its maw opened wide, teeth of lightning bared. The crew screamed. Kael wrenched the wheel, sending the Eversong into a sudden dive. The serpent's strike missed, ripping the air where the ship had been. The deck lurched, crew clinging to ropes, sails straining. Elira's heart pounded as she clutched the glowing shard. The serpent wheeled in the clouds, circling for another strike. What do they want? She shouted, Kael's jaw tightened. The same thing as me. Whatever you're holding. Another serpent struck, tail whipping across the deck. Planks splintered, a crewman thrown screaming into the abyss. Elira cried out, but Kael's voice cut through the chaos. Focus. If you can make that thing sing louder, do it now. She stared at the shard, its light pulsing in rhythm with the storm. It wasn't just reacting, it was calling. Closing her eyes, she pressed both hands around it and let the hum seep into her bones. The vision from the night before flickered again. Cliffs, sea, the compass whole and radiant. The shard's pulse aligned with her heartbeat, faster, stronger, until her skin prickled with raw energy. When she opened her eyes, the shard blazed like a star. The serpents froze mid-charge. Their glowing eyes locked on her, bodies coiling in the storm. Then, as one, they roared, a sound like mountains collapsing, and vanished back into the clouds, swallowed by the storm as if they had never been. Silence crashed down, heavy as the storm broke apart. The rain slackened. Thunder rolled into distance. Sunlight pierced the clouds, casting the deck in pale gold. The crew collapsed in exhaustion, some weeping, some laughing hysterically. Elira sank to her knees. The shard dimming once more. Kael strode to her, dripping rain, his eyes unreadable. He crouched, voice low so only she could hear. You're going to tell me what that is, and why the storm itself wants it. Elira met his gaze, her chest heaving. For the first time, she saw not just the rogue or the marauder, but the steel beneath, the man who had stared down death 100 times and walked away grinning. And she realized that as dangerous as he was, he might be the only one who could keep her alive long enough to learn the truth of the shattered compass. The Shattered Compass. Chapter 4. The Desert of Singing Bones. The Eversong drifted low over the desert, its storm-glass sails muted in the dying light. The horizon stretched endless and golden, but the sun's warmth had already begun to bleed away, replaced by a chill that crept from the sands. Dusk in the Singing Bones was dangerous. Every sailor knew it, though few had seen it with their own eyes. Elira gripped the railing and stared down. From above, the desert looked less like dunes and more like a battlefield frozen in time. Pale shapes jutted from the sand, spines, skulls, ribcages the size of houses. Some were jagged as mountains, others smoothed by centuries of wind. They sprawled across the land in no pattern, as though the bones of titans had simply fallen where they died. By the abyss, whispered Nira, the young navigator, her sharp eyes wide. They say the bones sing when the moon rises. They do, Kael said flatly. He leaned on the wheel, gaze hard as the dunes. His usual smirk was gone. And what they sing is death. Elira turned toward him. Then why land here? He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The shard in her satchel had been pulling her southward since Azure Bay, and now it burned hotter with every mile. Whatever piece of the compass lay ahead, it was buried in the heart of this cursed graveyard. Kael finally spoke, low enough that only she could hear. Because your little toy wants us here, and because I don't believe in running from fate. The crew lowered the anchor. Sand billowed as the hook bit into the earth, and ropes unfurled for descent. Only 4 would go, Kael, Elira, Nira, and Drex, the scarred mercenary who had once claimed he feared nothing, though even he avoided looking directly at the bone field. Maelor, the scholar, leaned over the railing, his eyes shining with fevered excitement. "Remember what I said," he called. "The echoes are drawn to memory. Hold nothing too close in your mind, or they'll feed on it." Elira frowned. "What does that mean?" "You'll see," Kael muttered darkly, then leapt down the rope. The sand crunched beneath their boots, finer than sugar, shifting with each step. The air was unnaturally still, heavy with a silence that pressed against the ears. Elira found herself whispering without meaning to. "This place feels wrong." "Because it is," Drex said. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, knuckles white. "The bones don't stay bones. The desert remembers. That's why folk don't come here." Kael strode ahead, lantern swinging at his side, the light painting rib cages and skulls in gold and shadow. "Keep close. The obelisk should be near the heart. How do you know?" Elira asked. He glanced back, eyes catching the lantern glow. "Because this isn't my first time here." She blinked, startled. But before she could press, the wind stirred. At first it was a sigh, brushing against the dunes. Then it rose, carrying with it a low hum. The sound traveled through the bones themselves, vibrating the air. It was not a song in any human sense, but a mournful resonance that filled Elira's chest until she thought her ribs might crack. Nira clapped her hands over her ears. "It's inside me. Don't fight it," Kael barked. "Move faster!" The hum shifted. It became voices, faint, broken, but unmistakable. They whispered Elira's name. They whispered all their names. She staggered. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was in her skull, her blood, her bones. She thought of her father's voice, gentle and steady, teaching her how to draw a coastline. For an instant, she heard it clearly. "Elira, careful with your lines," and then the voice fractured into a chorus of screams. "Elira!" Kael's grip clamped around her arm, hauling her upright. His eyes were hard. Don't give them anything to hold on to. Not fear, not memory. Or they'll drown you in it. She nodded shakily, clinging to his words as they pressed forward. They reached it at last. A titan's ribcage, arched overhead like the vault of a cathedral. In its hollow chest lay a half-buried obelisk of black stone, slick with a sheen that reflected no light. Glyphs crawled across its surface, shifting when stared at too long. The shard in Elira's satchel burned so hot it seared through the leather. She pulled it free and the glow lit the obelisk in silver fire. "That's it," she whispered. "Another fragment is inside," Drex growled. "Then grab it, quick, before—" The sand shifted. Figures rose from the ground. Bone echoes, just as Mailer had warned. They were shaped like people, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, their joints bending backward. Faces smooth and blank, mouths moving in silent chant. Each carried a weapon grown from jagged bone, edges sharp enough to gleam. Nira stumbled back. "Saints preserve us. Form up." Kael drew his saber, steel flashing. "Drex, left. Nira, cover us. Elira, get that shard." The echoes surged. Drex roared and met them head-on, blade cleaving through one in a spray of dust. But where it fell, the sand shifted again, pulling its form back together. Nira loosed arrows, two striking true, but the creatures only staggered before reforming. "They don't stay dead," she cried, "then stall them." Kael parried a strike, sparks flying, then slashed low to send another echo sprawling. He fought like the storm itself, precise and merciless, but for every enemy he cut down, two more emerged. Elira ran to the obelisk. Shard clutched tight. Her breath came ragged, her heartbeat deafening. She pressed the fragment against the stone, and light erupted. Visions stabbed her mind. Titans clashing in a wasteland, bones splintering beneath their weight. A compass whole and radiant guiding armies. And a prison, vast and dark, holding something that should never be unbound. The obelisk cracked. Within, she glimpsed another fragment, larger than hers, jagged like the crescent of a broken moon. "Elira!" Kael shouted, pinned against three echoes. Now she reached into the stone. Heat seared her skin, burning up her arm, but she refused to let go. With a cry, she tore the fragment free. The obelisk shattered. A shockwave blasted outward, throwing sand and bone alike into the air. The echoes screamed without sound, their forms unraveling into dust that scattered on the wind. The humming of the desert rose into a keening wail, then cut off all at once. Silence. Elira fell to her knees, clutching both fragments. They fused instantly, edges locking as though always meant to join. The compass's pull grew stronger, heavier, darker. Kael staggered toward her, blood on his cheek, saber still in hand. He crouched, eyes sharp with both fury and awe. "You nearly killed us all." She met his gaze, trembling. "Or saved us." He studied her a long moment, then gave a humorless smile. We'll call it even. For now. Above them, the moon rose over the rib cage, pale light spilling across the sands. The bones did not sing, but Elira swore she could still hear whispers on the wind. One word, repeated over and over, in voices older than stone. Closer. The Shattered Compass. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Ruined City. The Eversong skimmed over the desert like a hawk searching for prey. From the deck, Elira watched the dunes roll beneath them, endless and golden, until at last the land began to change. The sands thinned, replaced by ridges of stone blackened as if by ancient fire. Jagged walls rose from the earth in crooked lines, their peaks crumbling but still sharp against the sky, and nestled between those walls lay the ruins. Even from a distance, the city seemed wrong. Streets stretched in patterns too precise, angles too sharp, like a map drawn by a hand that didn't understand human shapes. Towers leaned inward as though conspiring, their shadows pooling unnaturally. No birds wheeled above it, no animals crept near. Elira's shard pulsed hot inside her satchel, and she knew what Kael would say before he opened his mouth. "We're landing," he ordered. The crew groaned in unison. Drex spat over the railing. "Captain, I've fought in half a dozen cursed lands, and even I know better than to walk into that." "Which is why you'll stay sharp," Kael shot back. "If the compass wants us here, then here we'll go." Elira bristled. "It doesn't want, it pulls. There's a difference." "Semantics, mapmaker," Kael said, though his eyes lingered on her a moment longer than necessary. "Whatever it is, it's leading us step by step, and I'll be damned if I let it get ahead of me." They descended on ropes once more. The city greeted them with silence so thick it pressed against their throats. Dust choked the air, stirred by every footstep, and fragments of broken statues lay scattered like bones. Nira muttered a prayer under her breath. "What kind of people built this?" "No people," Elira whispered before she realized she was speaking. The words came from the vision she'd seen at the obelisk, still etched in her skull. Titans, not men. Creatures vast enough to shatter mountains. Kael cocked an eyebrow but said nothing. They advanced cautiously down what might once have been a boulevard, flanked by toppled columns carved with symbols that writhed when touched by shadow. Elira felt them prick at her mind like fish hooks, letters she almost understood but couldn't hold long enough to name. At the center of the ruins stood a plaza dominated by a fountain, long dry, its basin filled with sand. In the fountain's heart rose a statue, half eroded but still vast, depicting a cloaked figure holding aloft a star-shaped device. Not a weapon, not quite a compass either. Something in between, Elira's breath caught. That's it. The shattered compass. Whole. The shard in her satchel pulsed in agreement. Kael circled the statue slowly, hand resting on his saber. Looks more like a warning than a prize. Before Elira could answer, the whisper began. At first, she thought it was the wind threading through hollow stone. Then the words sharpened. Not loud, but intimate, spoken directly into her ear. "Turn back." She flinched, spinning, but no one stood beside her. Kael, Nira, and Drex were all staring at the statue, oblivious. The whisper came again, from the shadows pooled at her feet. "It remembers you, Elira." Her stomach lurched. She took a step back. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Nira asked, frowning. The voice, before she could finish, the ground trembled. Dust cascaded from ruined walls. Cracks splintered across the plaza floor, and from them rose shapes. Echoes, but different from those in the singing bones. These were not dust and bone. They were carved from shadow itself, tall and thin, their faces blank masks of stone. Their movements were stiff at first, like marionettes, but as they drew nearer, they flowed with unsettling grace. Drex cursed and drew his blade. "I hate this cursed land." Kael stepped forward, saber flashing. "Form up, don't let them circle." The echoes lunged. Drex met the first with a roar, steel clanging against stone. Nira's arrows struck true, but the shadows swallowed them, shafts clattering useless to the ground. Kael danced between two opponents, his blade moving in arcs of silver light, but their numbers grew with every second. Elira staggered back, clutching her satchel. The shard burned hotter, pulling her toward the fountain, toward the statue. She ran. Ignoring Kael's shout, she clambered into the dry basin, scrambling up the fountain's cracked edge. The whispers screamed louder now, not one voice but hundreds, layered over each other like the rush of a tide. Break it, bury it, let it sleep. Her hands trembled as she pressed the shards together. The compass fragments flared, light spilling across the plaza. For an instant, the echoes froze mid-step, their bodies shuddering like puppets with cut strings. And then, vision. She stood in the same plaza, but alive with fire and banners. The statue gleamed, whole and new, the compass blazing in its figure's hand. Around her, titans bowed their heads, chained by runes that burned across their limbs. A voice echoed. Not whisper this time, but thunder. To bind the god, we shatter the way. To shatter the way, we scatter the star. Elira gasped, the vision tearing away. The plaza was ruins once more, Kael and the crew still locked in battle. The echoes pressed closer, unaffected by the shard's light. But something had changed. The statue's hand, once clenched, now cracked open. Within its stone palm lay a hollow, and within that hollow, another fragment. Elira, Kael roared. Now would be an excellent time. She seized the fragment. The moment her skin touched it, a wave of force exploded outward. Shadows screamed, unraveling like smoke in a gale. The echoes scattered into nothing, the plaza shuddering beneath the shock. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Elira collapsed, 3 fragments now fused in her grasp. The compass shape was clearer, still broken but undeniably more whole. Its pull was stronger than ever, and darker too, like a heartbeat not her own. Kael strode to her, chest heaving, sweat streaking his face. He knelt, eyes sharp. You're going to explain. Every detail. Starting now, she met his gaze, throat dry. I think the compass wasn't meant to guide. It was meant to seal. Something vast. Something that should never wake. Nira shuddered. Then why are we piecing it back together? Kael's expression hardened, but he said nothing, and from the shadows of the ruins, the whispers rose once more. No longer warning, but waiting. Closer. The Shattered Compass, Chapter 6. The Frozen Spires. The wind was a living thing, sharp and merciless. It howled across the deck of the Eversong, lashing sails and stinging every patch of exposed skin. Frost glittered on the ropes, crunching beneath the crew's gloved hands. Elira pulled her cloak tighter, but the cold still gnawed its way in, burrowing into her bones. Beyond the railing stretched a world of white. The desert's endless gold had given way to mountains glazed in ice, their peaks so tall they seemed to tear the belly of the sky. Between them rose spires of frozen stone, sheer and glittering, sculpted by centuries of wind into towers sharp as spears. They stood in clusters, unnatural in their symmetry, like a cathedral built by giants. The frozen spires, Nira murmured, her voice muffled by a wool scarf. They say storms here never sleep. They don't, Kael answered grimly. His hands worked the wheel, eyes scanning the ridges. And neither do the hunters, Drex scowled, stamping his boots for warmth. Hunters, out here? What could possibly live in this wasteland? Kael's mouth twisted. Things that eat the foolish who ask that question. Elira stood near the bow, compass fragments heavy in her satchel. They throbbed faintly, guiding her onward. The pull had been steady since they left the ruins, dragging them north, always north, toward a place that felt less destination than doom. She pressed her hand against the satchel, whispering almost to herself. What are you leading us to? The wind answered with a scream. The Eversong fought its way between the spires, each gust threatening to slam it against the glittering walls. Frost-laden ropes snapped taut, and sailors cursed as they tightened the lines. Above, storm-glass sails shimmered faintly, resisting the gale's fury. Kael stood firm at the wheel, his face carved with concentration. Elira watched him from the corner of her eye, struck again by how unshakable he seemed, as though storms and curses and deserts of bones were all the same to him. "Does nothing frighten you?" she asked suddenly. He flicked her a glance, one brow arched. "Plenty of things. I just don't give them the courtesy of showing it. And this place, these spires," his jaw tightened. "This place killed men I once called brothers. That's enough to keep me cautious." The words lingered between them, sharp as the wind. Elira wanted to ask more, but before she could, Nira's cry split the air. "Captain! To starboard!" Shapes moved along the spires. At first, Elira thought they were part of the ice itself, jagged shadows clinging to the cliffs. Then one shifted, unfolding with long, talon-like limbs. Its body was lean and pale, blending with the snow, but its eyes burned blue in the gloom. More followed. Dozens. Drex cursed. "Ice wraiths," Kael's voice was steel. "Archers, ready!" The wraiths leapt from the spires, gliding on membranous wings of frost. They shrieked, a sound like cracking ice, and descended on the ship. Arrows hissed upward. The first wraith staggered mid-dive, crashing against the mast in a spray of frost, but another tore a sailor from the rigging, hurling him screaming into the storm. Chaos exploded across the deck. Drex swung his blade, cleaving through a wraith that landed before him, shards of ice scattering like glass. Nira loosed arrow after arrow, her bowstring singing even as frost gathered on her gloves. Kael drew his saber, parrying a strike that left rime across the steel, then drove his blade into the creature's chest with a grunt. Elira ducked behind a crate, heart hammering. The compass fragments burned against her hip, pulsing faster as though sensing the danger. She pulled them free, and for a heartbeat, the wraiths faltered. Their shrieks rose into a discordant wail, eyes fixed on the shards. They want it, Elira realized aloud. One lunged straight for her. Kael was there in an instant, blade flashing. He cut the wraith down, shards scattering across the deck. He grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "Stay behind me, mapmaker." "I can't. The compass." "Then make it do something useful." She stared at the fragments, their light searing against her palm. The storm roared, wraiths shrieked, and then instinct. She slammed the shards together and raised them high. Light burst across the deck, silver and fierce. The wraiths screamed, clutching their heads, their bodies unraveling like snow whipped away by wind. One by one, they scattered into the storm, leaving silence and frost in their wake. The light faded. Elira collapsed to her knees, chest heaving. The fragments were warm again, as if nothing had happened. Kael crouched before her, face pale but eyes burning. "You're going to kill yourself with that thing." She met his gaze, trembling. "Or save us." His lips twitched, not quite a smile, not quite denial. The crew limped through the rest of the storm, battered but alive. By the time the winds relented, the Eversong had reached a plateau ringed by spires. In its center rose a ruin unlike any before, a tower of black stone, its surface veined with ice, standing defiantly against time. "The shards here," Elira whispered. Kael's jaw tightened. "Of course it is." They disembarked, boots crunching over frost. The air was sharp enough to cut, every breath burning the lungs. The tower loomed above them, its entrance a jagged maw. Inside, the cold was worse. Shadows pooled thick along the walls, and the floor was slick with frozen runes that glowed faintly beneath their steps. Elira traced one with her gloved finger, shivering at the hum that resonated up her arm. "This place was built to bind," she said. "Not to protect, not to worship, to contain." "Contain what?" Nira asked nervously. Elira hesitated, the fragments pulsing in answer. Something that should never be loosed. They climbed higher, the air growing colder with every step. Frost coated the walls like veins, spreading from a chamber at the top. When they reached it, Elira's breath caught. In the chamber's center hovered a massive shard, suspended above a pedestal of ice. It radiated cold so intense it frosted their eyelashes, yet its glow was blindingly bright. This was no fragment of stone. It was a piece of a star, jagged and furious. "The fourth," Elira whispered. "The compass is nearly whole." Kael stepped closer, his breath pluming. "And when it's whole?" Before she could answer, the shadows shifted. From the far side of the chamber, figures emerged. Not echoes, not wraiths, men. Cloaked, armed, their faces hidden. At their head strode a figure Elira recognized instantly, though she had prayed never to see him again. Lord Saren, her father's old rival. A man who had once sought her maps for conquest, not discovery. His eyes gleamed cold as the shard itself. "Thank you for leading me here," Saren said smoothly, his voice echoing in the frost. "You've done what I could not. And now, the compass is mine." Kael's saber was out in a flash. "Over my corpse," Saren smiled thinly. "That can be arranged." The chamber erupted in steel and shadow, the frozen spire itself groaning under the weight of battle. The Shattered Compass. Chapter 7. Betrayal under starlight. The battle in the frozen tower rang like shattered bells. Steel struck steel, boots skidded on frost, and shouts echoed against walls that seemed to lean inward with every clash. The massive shard pulsed above the pedestal, its glow searing, throwing jagged shadows across the chamber. Kael fought like he had been born with a blade in his hand. His saber cut arcs of silver light through Saren's cloaked soldiers, his boots steady even on slick ice. Drex barreled through another man, his sword carving brutal, efficient lines. Every strike meant to kill. Nira kept low, loosing arrows that hissed into gaps in armor, each shot deliberate despite the chaos. Elira pressed herself against the wall, shards in hand. The compass burned against her palms, its light answering the shard above. Her instincts screamed at her to reach for it, to claim it, but the whispers were louder than ever. Closer, closer, complete. "Elira!" Kael's voice snapped her out of it. He parried a strike and kicked his opponent back. "Don't just stand there, move!" She forced her legs into motion, skirting the edge of the chamber, heart hammering. Every step brought her nearer to the shard. Its pull was suffocating, like gravity turned to chains. Lord Saren's eyes followed her. Amid the chaos, he moved with terrifying calm, his sword cutting down Drex's attackers, his cloak barely stirring despite the storm of battle. "You feel it, don't you, girl? The compass doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the one strong enough to wield it. It belongs to no one." Elira snapped, though her voice wavered. His smile was ice. "That's what your father thought, too. And it got him killed." The words hit like a blade between the ribs. Elira stumbled, fury and grief colliding. Saren seized the moment, lunging toward her, but Kael intercepted, steel shrieking against steel. He shoved Saren back, eyes blazing. "You'll go through me first." "I intend to," Saren snarled. The chamber quaked. Frost splintered from the ceiling, snow cascading around them. The shard's glow flared, so bright Elira had to shield her eyes. And then she heard it. A sound not of whispers but of breathing. Slow, vast, as though the mountain itself exhaled. The shard's prison was weakening. "Elira!" Kael shouted without turning. "Take it now!" She didn't think. She reached out, fingers searing with cold as they touched the shard. Pain lanced up her arm, but she held fast. The star fragment screamed, light bursting outward, and then it fused into her compass, slotting perfectly into place. The force threw everyone to the floor. The chamber walls cracked, ice splitting in jagged veins. The whispers crescendoed into a roar. Closer, almost whole. When Elira staggered to her feet, the compass was heavier, larger, nearly complete. Its shape was undeniable now, a star broken and reforged. It pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Kael pushed himself up, blood at his temple, eyes fixed on her. For a moment, awe flickered there. Then Saren's blade was at his throat. "Hand it over," Saren hissed. Elira froze. Around them, the remnants of both crews dragged themselves upright, weapons raised but hesitant. The chamber groaning with each breath of the thing bound beneath. One wrong move and the whole tower might come down. "Elira," Kael said quietly, never taking his eyes from Saren. "Don't you dare!" Her grip tightened on the compass. Her father's face swam in her mind. The ruins, the bones, the whispers, all pulling her toward this moment. And then, betrayal. Nira moved. Quick as a striking snake, she snatched a knife from her belt and pressed it against Elira's ribs. The breath left Elira's lungs. She looked at Nira, horrified. "What? Sorry, Elira," Nira whispered, her eyes shimmering with something like regret. "But my family serves Saren. Always has. I didn't join this crew for you. I joined to bring him the compass." Kael's roar shook the chamber. "Nira!" Saren's smile widened, cold and cruel. "Loyalty is such a rare thing these days. Refreshing, isn't it, Captain, to see it still exists?" The knife bit against Elira's side, just enough to draw blood. Nira's hand trembled, but she didn't falter. "Give him the compass, Elira. Please, don't make me—" Elira's mind raced. She could hand it over and buy time. She could resist and risk Nira cutting her down. But deeper than thought, the compass pulsed, whispering, demanding, "Choose." The chamber cracked again, louder this time. A fissure split the wall, icy wind screaming through. Snow whirled, starlight spilled across the floor. The sky outside was a canopy of black velvet, scattered with cold fire. Betrayal under starlight. Elira's decision formed in her chest before her mind caught up. She twisted hard, ramming her elbow into Nira's stomach. The knife skittered across the floor. Kael lunged in the same instant, breaking Saren's hold with a furious strike. Chaos exploded again. Drex tackling two of Saren's men, Kael dueling Saren with a snarl, Elira clutching the compass as though it were her own heart. Nira scrambled for her knife, eyes wide with panic. Elira caught her wrist, their faces inches apart. "You could have told me," Elira hissed, her voice breaking. Nira's eyes shone with tears. "And you would have stopped me?" Elira didn't answer. She wrenched the knife free and flung it into the fissure, where the wind swallowed it whole. The mountain groaned again. A deafening crack split the ceiling. Saren disengaged from Kael, snarling, and signaled his men. "Fall back! We have what we came for." He vanished into the fissure's storm with Nira on his heels, their cloaks whipping like banners. The rest of his soldiers followed, retreating into the night. And then the tower collapsed. Kael seized Elira's arm, dragging her toward the stairs. Drex shoved aside falling stone with sheer brute force, covering their retreat. They burst from the entrance just as the spire groaned and folded inward, vanishing in a plume of snow and ice. The mountain was silent again. Silent, but not still. Deep beneath, something shifted, something vast. They staggered back aboard the Eversong, half frozen, half broken. The crew worked in grim silence, bandaging wounds, stoking lanterns. Above them, the stars gleamed mercilessly as though mocking. Kael leaned against the railing, his breath steaming, his face pale with exhaustion. He didn't look at Elira when he spoke. "We lost her." Elira's throat tightened. "She chose him." "No," Kael said softly. "She chose herself." Elira clutched the compass fragments to her chest, their pulse steady, insistent. Nearly whole, nearly unbound, and in the silence of the starlit sky, the whispers returned. One piece more, one seal broken, one god unchained. The Shattered Compass. Chapter 8. The compass reforged. The Eversong sailed north in silence. The crew moved about their duties with the efficiency of habit, but their voices were hushed, their eyes wary. The betrayal in the frozen spires still clung to the ship like frost, and no one trusted the shadows anymore. Elira leaned against the railing, the compass fragments heavy in her lap. They were no longer separate stones, but a single jagged device, fused with veins of silver light. Nearly whole, its star shape gleamed with a cold brilliance that throbbed in rhythm with her pulse. She had not slept since Saren's escape with Nira. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nira's tear-filled gaze, the knife pressed to her ribs, Kael's shout echoing in the chamber. She saw the mountain collapse. She felt the compass whisper, "One more piece, one more step, One more seal broken. Kael approached quietly, though she sensed him long before his boots reached the deck beside her. He carried himself differently now, tighter, heavier, as though the weight of command had grown sharper overnight. His hand rested on the hilt of his saber, though there was no threat in sight. "You're staring at it again," he said. Elira didn't look up. "It won't stop staring back." He studied her for a moment, the wind tugging at his cloak. "You're afraid?" "Yes," she admitted. "Good," he said simply. "Means you still know what fear is." "I'd worry more if you didn't." She glanced at him, searching his face. The smirk he usually wore was gone. His expression was harder, worn by storms and betrayal, but there was no cruelty in it. Only truth. "What if reforging it isn't the right choice?" she asked quietly. "What if leaving it broken is worse?" He countered. "We don't get to choose safe paths, Elira. Only the ones in front of us." Her fingers curled around the compass. Its pulse quickened as though agreeing with him. The final pull led them farther than Elira had thought possible. Beyond the spires, past the reach of familiar charts, into seas where the stars themselves seemed strange. Nights stretched longer, days shorter, until time itself felt unreliable. At last, the horizon split. Jagged cliffs rose from the sea like the teeth of some colossal beast, black stone slick with salt and mist. At their center yawned a cavern so vast it seemed to swallow the ocean whole. Faint light pulsed from its depths, answering the compass. "The last fragment," Elira breathed. Kael's jaw tightened. "And Saren knows it too," Drex spat into the waves. "Then we beat him to it." The crew anchored the Eversong at the cavern's mouth, lanterns swaying against the mist. The air smelled of brine and iron, thick and oppressive. Elira clutched the compass as they descended into a skiff, its glow illuminating the jagged walls. Inside, the cavern stretched endlessly, its ceiling lost to darkness. The water was still as glass, reflecting the faint light of the compass. Stalactites dripped steadily, the sound echoing like a clock, and at the cavern's heart stood an altar. It was carved from obsidian, veined with silver, its surface etched in runes that writhed when touched by the light. Upon it rested the final shard, larger than all the rest, shaped like the keystone of a lock. Its glow was steady, patient, as though it had been waiting for this moment. The compass fragments in Elira's hands burned with such heat she nearly dropped them. They wanted the last shard. Kael's voice was low, urgent. "If you take it, what happens?" "I don't know," Elira admitted. "Visions, whispers, a prison. I think it binds something vast, something that should never be free." "Then maybe we don't take it." Her head snapped toward him. "I said we don't get safe choices," he interrupted, his gaze locked on the altar. "But listen to me, Elira. If this thing unseals what it was meant to keep locked away, we may be delivering the world to ruin. You have to be certain." Before she could answer, a voice rang through the cavern. "I'll make the choice for you." Shadows rippled at the water's edge as Saren emerged, Nira at his side. His soldiers fanned out behind him, blades gleaming in the compass light. Saren's eyes were fixed on the shard, hunger burning in their depths. "I should thank you," he said smoothly. "You've carried the pieces farther than I could have alone. Now hand it over." Kael stepped in front of Elira, saber drawn. "You'll die before you touch it." Saren's smile was cold. "So dramatic. But unnecessary." He nodded once, and Nira raised her bow. Elira's chest clenched. "Nira, please." The younger woman's face was pale, her hands trembling on the string. "I don't want to do this, Elira, but I swore to my family. I swore to Saren. If I betray him, they'll kill them. All of them." Elira's throat tightened. "And if you serve him, he'll kill everyone else." Nira's eyes shimmered with tears, but her grip did not falter. Saren's gaze snapped back to Elira. The compass. Now. The altar pulsed. The shard glowed brighter. The compass fragments in Elira's hand seared her skin, demanding completion. The cavern shook with the sound of that vast, slow breathing, deeper now, louder, as though the prison itself strained against its bonds. Choose. Elira's breath came ragged. Around her, Kael faced Saren. Drex squared against his soldiers, Nira's arrow pointed at her heart, and in her hands pulsed the fate of everything. She stepped forward. The world seemed to narrow into a single moment. She pressed the fractured compass against the final shard. Light exploded. The cavern shook violently, runes flaring across the altar, the walls, the ceiling itself. Water churned, waves slamming against stone. The shards screamed, the compass shrieked, and then silence. When Elira opened her eyes, the compass lay whole in her hands. No cracks, no missing pieces. A star reforged, its light both blinding and dark, radiance wrapped in shadow. It pulsed like a living heart. The whispers filled her mind, louder than ever, undeniable, unsealed, unbound, awakened. The cavern groaned. Far below, something stirred. Kael grabbed her shoulder, his eyes fierce. "What did you do?" Elira stared at the compass, her hands shaking. "I finished it." Saren's laughter echoed through the cavern, wild and triumphant. Then the prison falls, and the god wakes. The water below split apart, glowing with light not of this world. The Shattered Compass. Chapter 9. The Prison of the Forgotten God. The world trembled. When the compass clicked into place, a pulse of energy surged from Elira's hands, radiating outward in waves. The cavern shuddered, ice cracking, stalactites plummeting into the churning water below. The shard's light, now a single fused star, blazed like a miniature sun, illuminating every shadow. And then it stirred. From the depths of the cavern, a shape emerged. At first it was just a shadow, a shifting ripple in the air. Then it grew, stretching upward, filling the space, coiling like smoke and lightning. The water boiled as a colossal form took shape, ancient and titanic. Its eyes were voids, black as nothingness, but they burned with awareness, awakening after 1,000 years. The Forgotten God. Elira's breath caught. She felt the pulse of the compass thrumming against her chest, desperate to tether the being, to force it back into its prison. The whispers returned, no longer voices but commands and shruggi. Complete the seal, or perish. Kael dropped into a defensive stance, saber in hand. Drex readied his blade. Nira, arrow notched, hesitated on the precipice between loyalty and fear. Saren, however, simply watched, his smile a dagger in the cold. "It's beautiful," Saren said, voice trembling with awe and ambition. "Imagine wielding that power." Elira's hands shook. "It's not meant to be wielded. It's meant to be locked away." The god's form expanded, arms vast as mountains, stretching upward to the cavern's ceiling. Its voice was not sound but thought, echoing in their minds. "Why do you disturb my rest?" Elira's fingers tightened on the compass. "You were imprisoned because you were dangerous. Because the world isn't ready for you." Dangerous? No. Necessary. Forgotten. Now awake. Kael stepped forward, blade raised. "Then we stop you. One way or another." The god's gaze swept over them. The pressure of it was physical, like a tide pressing down. Drex stumbled to his knees. Nira fell back, arrow trembling in her fingers. Elira fought to keep the compass steady, to keep it pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "All who oppose me will break. All who bind me will shatter." Saren laughed, raising his arms. "Bind? You can't bind a god, girl. Only control it. And with that compass, I could—" Kael lashed out, slashing Saren across the chest, forcing him to stagger back. "Not today." Elira took a deep breath. She could feel the god testing the compass, trying to unseat it from her grasp. Light flared in waves across the cavern, throwing everyone to the ground. Weak. 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 "Keep your focus," Kael shouted, rolling forward to fend off Saren's recovered soldiers. "If you lose the compass, we all die." The compass pulsed violently, and Elira felt it pulling at the god. The Titan roared, not with sound, but with force that shook her bones. The altar split, shards of obsidian tumbling into the swirling water. "Bind it, Elira," Kael yelled, his voice nearly lost in the maelstrom. She closed her eyes and pressed the compass against the ground, letting it hum through her arms, her chest, her mind. The shards glowed white-hot, connecting to the last fragment still hovering above the pedestal. The god screamed, an exhalation that shattered stone, cracked ice, and turned the water to foam. Its vast hands struck, swatting Saren and his men aside like rag dolls. Kael deflected one blow, blade clanging against a finger as long as a spear. Drex tackled a soldier mid-flight, smashing him into a wall of ice. Nira screamed, caught in the thrall of the god's presence. Elira opened her eyes. The compass glowed so bright it became a beacon of white and silver. Energy surged from it, stretching tendrils of light that wrapped around the god, pulling it downward. "Resist!" it boomed in her mind. "I am eternity." "Then eternity will end," she whispered. The ground beneath them cracked, fissures opening across the cavern floor. Water churned violently, ice splintering, debris raining from the ceiling. Saren clawed toward her, hands desperate, eyes wide with greed and fear. Kael leapt, seizing Saren's cloak, dragging him back from the grasp of a rising wave. "Stay down!" Elira's palms burned, the compass demanding more. The shards glowed brighter, embedding themselves in her vision, her skin, her very mind. She cried out as the power surged, the god's form stretching, resisting, screaming with the voice of storms and mountains and oceans. And then the seal clicked. A shockwave of light slammed through the cavern. The god froze, suspended in the tendrils of the compass's magic. Slowly, impossibly, it was pulled down, collapsing into a sphere of shimmering energy, shrinking, compressing, until the fragments of its prison formed around it once again. The compass's glow softened, its pulse slowing to a steady rhythm in Elira's chest. Silence. Kael collapsed beside her, breathing hard. By the abyss, Drex groaned somewhere in the shadows. Nira slumped to her knees, tears freezing on her cheeks. Saren lay on the floor, coughing, broken and defeated. Elira sank to her knees, trembling, the compass cool in her hands for the first time. She had done it. She had reforged the compass. She had faced the god and lived. Kael placed a hand on her shoulder, eyes fierce but proud. You did it. You kept it bound." She looked up at him, fear and relief battling in her chest. "For now," she whispered. "But it's not gone forever. Not truly." The compass hummed faintly as though it understood her words. Its shards glimmered like captured stars. Saren spat blood, struggling to rise. "This isn't over. You'll never truly control." Kael's saber swept in a flash. Saren froze, then fell silent. The crew regrouped, bruised and exhausted. The cavern itself seemed to sigh in relief, the water calming, the ice settling, the wind dying. Outside, the first hint of dawn painted the horizon in pale gold. Elira stood, compass in hand, and looked to the horizon. Beyond lay the world, still dangerous, still uncertain, but alive. The compass had been reforged. The forgotten god was bound, and for the first time since the journey began, she felt a spark of hope. Kael approached, offering a hand. "So, what now, mapmaker?" She took it, her grip steady. "Now, we live, and we make sure nothing like this ever wakes again." Above them, the stars began to fade in the dawn. The whispers silenced for the first time in 1,000 years, and the Eversong set sail toward the rising sun, carrying a crew forever changed, a world forever in balance, and a compass that would shape the fate of all who dared follow its call. The Shattered Compass. Chapter 10. Epilogue. The world reclaimed, the sea was calm. For the first time in months, the wind carried a gentle song instead of the roar of storms. The Eversong glided across glassy waters, sails slack but full of life, sunlight glinting off storm-glass edges. Frost and desert dust had long been washed away, leaving only memories of the battles fought and dangers faced. Elira stood at the bow, compass in hand. Its star-shaped shards pulsed faintly, steady like a heartbeat of the world itself. Nearly whole, nearly complete, but not yet a weapon. It was a key, a guide and a warning all at once. She traced its edges with careful fingers, remembering the deserts, the spires, the ruins, and the god that had once been unbound. Behind her, Kael moved quietly across the deck, watching the horizon. He had grown quieter since the frozen spires, thoughtful, as if carrying not just the weight of command but the weight of the compass's choices. "Do you ever regret it?" Elira asked softly. Kael glanced at her, expression unreadable. "The world's always dangerous. You can't live in regret, only in what you do next," she nodded. That had been the lesson of their journey. Every step forward carried risk, every choice rippled outward. And yet they had survived. They had sealed the god. They had reforged the compass. Below deck, Drex and Nira were repairing the stormglass rigging, moving with the ease of those who had seen death but lived through it. Drex's usual scowl was softened by fatigue, though his hands were still rough, scarred from combat. Nira's gaze lingered on Elira's compass. She hadn't spoken much since the final confrontation, but her silence was not guilt. It was thought, reflection. She had betrayed Elira once, but she had survived Saren's shadow. Perhaps, Elira realized, loyalty was something earned, not taken. Finally, Nira met her eyes. I don't deserve to sail with you," she said quietly. "You earned your place," Elira replied, voice steady despite the tension that still lingered. "Choices aren't always clean, but you made it through. That counts." Nira nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Then I'll try to do better. From now on." Kael leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, smirking faintly. "See? That's why we keep her around. Even after stabbing you in the ribs, metaphorically or otherwise." Elira laughed, the sound carrying across the deck. It was a sound of release, of relief, of survival. The sun climbed higher, gilding the horizon in gold and rose. Ahead lay new lands, uncharted waters, and the promise of exploration. But for now, the crew allowed themselves a measure of peace. They had faced deserts of singing bones, ruins that whispered frozen spires, and a god older than time. And they had survived. Elira studied the compass again. Its pulse was calm, steady. The shards fit together perfectly now, forming a star whole and strong, glowing faintly with the power of the god sealed within. She could feel it. Not alive like a creature, not sentient like Saren, but aware. Waiting. Patient. Its light a reminder of responsibility, not ownership. Kael joined her, gaze following hers. "Do you think the world will ever know what we stopped?" "Maybe," Elira said softly. "Or maybe it doesn't need to. Some things are better kept secret," Kael shrugged. "I suppose some secrets are worth carrying then." The compass hummed lightly in Elira's hands as if affirming the thought. Saren was gone. They had never seen him again after the collapse of the frozen spires and the binding of the god. His ambition, his greed, had been thwarted, though Elira knew such men rarely vanished completely. Somewhere he was plotting, waiting for another chance. Nira remained aboard, her loyalty slowly shifting to the crew who had saved her life and the world. She worked beside Drex now, sharing in duties, sharing in cautious smiles. The tension from betrayal still lingered, but it had softened, leaving a cautious camaraderie. Drex, for his part, grumbled endlessly about storms and gods and desert sands. Yet he had never left Elira's side when it mattered. Even Kael acknowledged it with a rare nod of respect. As the Eversong sailed further north, beyond known maps and past the horizon of legends, Elira climbed to the deck once more. She held the compass up to the sunlight. The shards glimmered like captured stars, reminding her that power could be wielded without destruction, that knowledge could be held without greed. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, the forgotten god slept, bound by a star reforged. The world's safe, for now. Elira, Kael said from behind, voice soft. Where to next? She smiled, eyes scanning the distant, uncharted waters. Wherever the wind takes us. There are still maps to draw, lands to explore, and maybe some things to protect before they wake again. Kael's grin was faint but genuine. Lead the way, mapmaker. The crew gathered around her, laughter soft and cautious but real. The horizon stretched infinite and golden, sunlight sparkling across the waves. For the first time since the deserts, the ruins, and the frozen spires, the world felt whole. Elira's hand rested on the compass. Its pulse was steady, a heartbeat she could trust. She knew challenges would come again, as they always did. But for now, they had reclaimed the world from darkness, sealed away the ancient god, and survived every betrayal, every storm, every danger the universe had thrown at them. Above, the wind whispered gently through the sails. The Eversong sailed forward, and the world, for a moment, was theirs.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video brought a little light to your day and eased away some of life's tired moments. Please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more content like this coming your way.